In this video, we're going to talk about setting up workflows to automate masking. Now, if you've watched previous videos, you would have seen that we had mounted a database from this instance called Finance and run it through a masking process. When setting up the masking server for workflow, there's a couple of pre-work things you need to do. If we go to Domain Manager and we find our particular host, in this case I've used a filter, and we edit it, one of the things we want to set is that under the connector settings, we want to supply a user to the connector that the connector can run local commands with that is authorized to not only work with SQL, but also work with scripting and databases. So this must be in fact, I would recommend you test your masking logged on as this user. This is because we need the connector to actually run scripts as a user. Now, in fact, we need to put this into two places. So first on the host, and this is only the host that does the masking, not everywhere, just the host that does the masking. That's part number one. Part number two is an application manager. We choose our app and we go manage workflows, and now we add some workflows. Now, fortunately for you, I've already done them. There are two workflows here, each using a specific type of access. So we have direct mount workflows and LiveClone workflows. Now, a direct mount workflow, if we edit that one, we'll see what it looks like. And much as I could have built a workflow, what you see would look exactly the same. We choose direct mount and we choose on demand. We can have scheduled. Now, direct mount will choose to mount a database to a specific host, in this case WinDV1, and then run a postscript, which is the script that starts the masking. Now note there is a timeout set here. Now the default, I've put it to 120 seconds, which is very quick. The default is actually 600 seconds. You might need to increase that timeout. Just something to be aware of. 120 is very quick. How will you know how long it takes? Easy. Test it manually, as I showed in the previous video. Do a manual mount, manually run the masking, evaluate how long it takes. Certainly when you're doing initial setup, you should be doing this. And then, obviously, when we run the script, we're running it against a database. So in this, because it's an instance, there's a number of databases to choose from. We only want the finance database. And when we mount it to WinDV1, we want to call it Mask Finance. Now, we do have the option to manage new application, which we don't need to do. So that's a direct mount workflow. Now, the LiveClone workflow, there's two specific differences. The first is that when we do a LiveClone workflow, we're actually going to mask not a snapshot, but a LiveClone. So you can see here, rather than direct mount, we've got LiveClone selected. Again, in this example, it's an on-demand. You could use a scheduled. We have to give the LiveClone a label. We have to decide where the LiveClone will live, which snapshot pool. And then we have this option called mount for pre-processing. So in the direct mount, the previous example, the previous workflow, we effectively mount directly to the masking server, mask it on the masking server, and leave it there. The workflow is complete. But in this example, we're going to mount it to the masking server, request pre-processing on the masking server by running the dvmask.bat. Notice I haven't got a timeout, but you might need one. And once that's run, when we go to next, then it mounts it to the final host, which in this example is SynWin SQL 5. And there's no scripts here because it's already masked. And again, we're going to take that finance database, but we're mounting it. And this is the important bit. In this example, mask finance, that's bad. We want to call it dev finance. Why? Because the database should have three names: the source name, the name while being masked, and the name after it's been masked. So let's just run one of these. Let's run the direct mount because it's quicker. We don't need to have a refresh LiveClone. When we do a run now remember we can do this using CLI, but in this case we're going to use it using direct workflow. We have this option here, provision new virtual application or refresh an existing one. In other words, have we run the workflow to this host before? So we're going to provision a new virtual application because there's not one there at the moment. We'll use the latest source image, but we could use earlier ones. We'll leave the roll forward time as it is. And again, it's mounting to WinDV1, which is where our masking software is. It's going to be, we're going to take the finance database off that virtual copy and mount it as mask finance. And we're going to run the prescript, or rather the postscript against it to do the masking. So I'm going to hit submit. Now, it's very similar to what you saw earlier, which is that when we go to the server, so if we switch over, we can see that we don't have any drives where the database is, and at the moment we don't have any databases. So the virtual mount will run shortly, and it will automatically run the bat file. And I'll show you how we prove that in a moment. But first, let's just wait for the mount to complete. We want those drives to appear. So we can see our drives are starting to pop in. I've got the Y drive, the other drives will appear momentarily. So there are our drives. And obviously the next thing that will happen is that the database will be started. That happens pretty quick. There it is, Mask Finance. And now finally, the masking process should occur. Now, how to prove this? Well, remember, in the bat file, we specified we wanted logs. So if I go to where we specified logs, in DV logs, what we should see, if we open this up, is that at the time we're running it, it's 2:27 p.m., look at 2:27, we can see that successful masking has occurred and it's exited with exit code 0. The other way we can do it is if we pop over to the UDS agent log, we can actually find the relevant bit where the masking was run. So if I quickly nip up, I think I just shot past it, it's right here. So we can see here that the script was run. Here's the script, and we can see we got an exit code 0. This is really important. We don't want the workflow to succeed unless the mount which did the masking actually succeeds in terms of masking running. So what we've now got is a mounted copy of the database. It's up, it's running, and if you remember from previous videos, you'll know that the first name should be Billy Reimer, because that's the masking setup. We're getting deterministic masking. It's using the same name every time. It's working brilliantly. So now that was the direct mount, and you can see it's now gone to idle because it was successful. If I'd done this instead, two different things would have occurred. So if I run now on that, now I'm not going to be able to do that because I currently got one mounted, but I would refresh the live clone, and then if I perform a mount, I'm not mounting, this is not the mount to the prep mount server where the masking is occurring. This will be the final mount. But the end result will be the same. I'll get a mask copy of the database, but instead here it will be presented to a final development server, which is a far more likely scenario that you'd want to run, because obviously you don't want your developers logging into the masking server because that's not where you want them. But remember, as I said, what we can do is that if we're running the direct mount workflow, what we could do is once we've successfully done it, there's our masked copy, I could unmount it and then remount it to a development server. So that's another alternative. Lots of choices here, but you can clearly see how the workflows are set up. One final point I'll make with the workflows, which is that while we set up the host to run as a specific user, you should also set up the workflow to run as a specific user. Same user. We want that because the connector needs to be able to run these scripts, so it needs to actually know the user it's going to run them as. And again, you'll actually be able to spot that if you look very carefully in the logs. There's actually a point here where it actually talks about impersonation. So we're actually running the script as that user. Vital point. All right. Thank you very much. Hope that was useful to you.